Thank you. Silica sand. It's not really a new world metal. There's not a lot of silica is turned into silicon metal, but it's one of the many uses. Its greatest use by far is in glass making. And in the Asia Pacific, the market's about 140 million tonnes a year goes into making glass. So that's where we're aimed, but there's a fair chunk of it also goes into the foundry industry. It's a product that everybody is surrounded by and you use all the time, and you never think about it being particularly silica sand. Just in the house, in your home, not just your glass windows, but you've got a computer there or a TV there, LCDs are predominantly silica. The thin screen on the front of your TV screen or your monitor, bench tops, less so in Australia these days, but it's the building cladding, insulation, and if you talk about your car, not just the windows, but once again LCDs, LEDs, and the casting of heads, blocks and manifolds are also done in silica sand. And if you get into the renewables industry, thermal protection in lithium batteries is a silica sponge. The covering on wind turbine blades is high tensile yarn, which is made from high quality silica sand. So it's a product that's used extensively. It's the second most used commodity on the planet after water. 50 billion tonnes a year. Iron ore pales in comparison with the amount of silica sand. 49.5 billion goes into concrete. But therein lies the problem. The demand for concrete sand is taking away sand that could be beneficiated to the quality that's required for glass making and the foundry industry. And that's where we're looking to sit. So these are products that are used extensively, so much so Asia is running out of sand. Now, it's hard to think that you'll run out of sand, and when you think about sand that's suitable for glass making particularly, it's not beach sand. It's predominantly calcium carbonate, shell grit. It's not desert sands. Desert sands have got orangey red colour on it. That's iron. When it comes to glass making, iron is the enemy. So you're limited to the amount of sand that is suitable for glass making in the foundry industry. And predominantly it is granite based. It is eroded granites. And in our case, all of our deposits their source is eroded granites. So it is the commodity that drives development and is required for development. So when you look at the stimulus spending that's gone on in Asia ever since COVID, it is infrastructure. And it's the main reason why the iron ore price has been so high for rebar. But the demand is for glass and concrete particularly. So Australia produces quite a bit of sand. And in fact, it is the largest exporter of silica sand in the world. And that's because every other country, particularly in Asia, there's only one country that exports silica sand, because every country is worried about their own domestic supply, now particularly for concrete, but also for the glass making industry as well. So in northern Queensland at Cape Flattery, almost nobody in Queensland even understands that this is a project that is the single biggest exporter in the world. And it exports anywhere 2.5 to 3.5 million tonnes a year. All of it goes to Asia. It's owned by Mitsubishi. It's been operating for over 50 years. There in Western Australia, Hanson Industries, they have a byproduct out of producing sand for concrete, and they send sand, about 350,000 tonnes a year, goes to the Philippines to make beer bottles for San Miguel Light, almost exclusively, because it happens to be very high in aluminium. Kemerton sand generally goes to Japan to make windscreens for Toyota. And Albany, similar to that too. And it's owned by Toyota and a joint venture with Tochu. Our company, we've got about 600 odd million shares out there, a bunch of options. Most of those were issued on the last raise we did. We've got enough money in the bank to get through, when I'll run through the environmental process for our first project. And while we've been tied up in this environmental process, which quite frankly is about 2 years longer than it should be, the price has drifted off. But we're into the last stages of that. The team, we've got now, I would say, the most experienced silica sand team in Australia, mainly because there are not many other players anyway. But we've got an experienced board and the executive, we've got all the processes well and truly covered. Most important here, Yanil Kim, he's our marketing manager. He's a South Korean guy, has been tied up in coming up 20 years experience in and around silica sand. He knows every player in Asia, and we've got him based in KL. We've got 5 very large projects. They're simple mining. The processing is all fairly easy. We've selected these sites because they're close to infrastructure, and these are very, very long-term projects. And we're looking to supply into the float glass or plate glass, flat glass. It's interesting that it's called float glass because you take a number of ingredients, you melt them together at about 1600 degrees and you float it over molten tin. Then that's how you get glass nice and flat. So it's generally, in the industry, it's called float glass. That's a big industry. Obviously, there's only one manufacturer of float glass in Australia, out here at Dandenong, and there's only 4 other glass plants in Australia. China has 270. So one day we'll get to China, but at the moment we're dealing with Korea and Japan. Container glass, that's all we produce basically in Australia these days. But the growing market, and this is our second project at Muche, cover glass, the piece of glass that goes over a solar panel, that's a market that's growing at an incredible rate. Slowed down a little bit at the moment, but it's still the fastest growing sector out of glass manufacturing in the world. So Arrowsmith North is our first project. We've got 220 million tonnes of reserve. So this is good for more than 100 years. So we don't need to do any more exploration. And on this project, we've already done all the metallurgical test work, process circuit design, all the engineering required for this project to get up and running. Muche is a different proposition. It's much higher grade. And if you get to this plus 99.9, we can produce a 99.9 or a 3.9 product out of there quite easily. It's a completely different market to Arrowsmith North. Arrowsmith North are going to flat glass, container glass and the foundry industry, whereas Muche are almost exclusively going to the solar panel industry. So Arrowsmith North, it's very big. We've grade controlled a section of it. We've got 6 years of production. We've completed all the engineering on a fairly unique process circuit. That's all established. There's infrastructure, there's railway line. We've already drilled a water bore into the Yarragadee. We've got plenty of water. Brand highway, #1 highway. Strangely enough, Muche and Arrowsmith North are both on Brand Highway. They're just 200 kilometres apart. And there's potential here. Next door to us is a gas field, the Bahara gas field owned by Beach and Mitsui. So there's opportunity here for a gas-fired power station and also hybrid. Arrowsmith North BFS, we put out a new one in March. It's good metrics. It's an after-tax NPV at 10% discount of just 170 million with 25 years of a 100-year resource. We'll produce 4 products. 3 will be for the foundry industry and 1 for the glass-making industry. Environmental approvals getting close. We've developed this unique method for rehabilitation, and the key to the whole environmental approvals process is in fact rehabilitation. Our whole mining method is developed around this method of rehabilitation. It's called vegetation direct transfer. And this bush that we're looking to operate at Arrowsmith North is only waist high, and the root systems only go 200-300 mil down. We're looking to take a sod 400 mil out. So we're transplanting this back to the area where we've already been mining. It's quite unique, but easily the best environmental outcome and rehabilitation outcome you could possibly get. So We've been through this process for, well, 2.5 years, but we started a year before that doing all environmental surveys. We got judged to be a public environmental review. That review was last year. We got a summary of submissions in September. We lodged a first version of our response to submissions in October last year, and we got comments back 5 months later in March, and we're about to put in a new revised response to submissions. The major part of it is what's called the Rehabilitation Management Plan, and we're running a peer review at the moment with another consulting group. This is to make life easier for the EPA, and we will get that peer review into this week, and we'll lodge a new document next week. We've had a couple of meetings at a very high level at the EPA, and it's taken a couple of years just to get to that level. We're actually talking to the managers of our assessment managers, and that is speeding up the process, no doubt. So the next step is to lodge a new response to submissions. We're quite sure that will deal with any of the recent issues raised by the EPA. Then that gets published, not for public comment, it just gets put on the website. That is an acknowledgement by the EPA that they require no more information to conduct the assessment. And from that document, that in fact lends itself to the conditions under which they'll approve it, and then the next step is they'll make a submission to the Minister for approval. We've spoken to the Minister. He said, when that's happening, you let me know, and he said, I'll deal with it quickly. So it's as quick as it can be done. Muche is world class. The deposit itself's probably got 1 billion tonnes. We've outlined 200 million tonnes. Once again, good infrastructure in the area. It's got a granted mining lease and miscellaneous licences to access it. Test work shows we can get to 3 nines quite easily, but less than 100 ppm iron. That's the critical number, not the silica content, but the iron content. You get below 100 ppm, that's what you require to make glass to go over a solar panel. You need ultra clear glass, it's called. And that's critical for production of solar panels. Muche vegetation, the recalcitrant species here are actually the grasses and sedges. The taller banksias there are easier to propagate. Unfortunately, it now looks like that. A bushfire went through there in January. Part of that was an area we were going to do some more VDT test work. We've had to select another site and we're getting approval for that. We want to get the same vegetation, but obviously waste the time doing it here. The flow sheet, it's simple. The key to this is attritioning. Now, attritioning is where you take an agitated slurry and the grains rub on grains and you polish each of the grains. So all you do is get a cleaner quartz crystal, higher grade SiO2. So that's the key to it, is attritioning. All the rest of the process is taking out the stuff that you've rubbed off each of the grains. So the fines come out. Engineering is completed. It's a fairly simple plant. The infrastructure around it costs as much money to put in place as it does the construction of the plant. We think our ESG responsibilities, we take them seriously, but we also think the best way to deal with them is at the planning stage. So we've spent quite a bit of money on dealing with heritage issues, innovation, reducing our carbon footprint and reducing our emissions, and rehabilitation. So they're all at this planning stage. We're looking at a few other things. We've been published in the Critical Minerals Prospectus. Silica is in there. We've got both projects, Muche and Arrowsmith North, are in there. We got a grant from the West Australian Government to produce silica flour, and that's a flour that goes into making LCDs, another market that is growing like crazy. And we've had that produced and we've sent some samples off and we've got a great response back on that. We got granted a geothermal permit in Western Australia. They're not easy to get. The oil and gas industry don't actually like geothermal, and we've farmed that out to a company called Steam Resources. We're not doing it. We don't have to contribute any funds, but we do get a free carried interest. And VDT, we're putting in some trials. The EPA process is not dependent on our VDT trials. They're for our own use. We have already conducted some at both Arrowsmith and Mouchet. We want to do some more, that's all. So really, we've got lots and lots of silica sand. We've got gas reserves and hydrogen projects in the Midwest developing, which can supply a glass manufacturing facility. That's our sort of end game there. There's potential to produce green glass. Nippon Sheet Glass have actually made sheet glass using hydrogen. So technically it could be done. And we like to get high purity quartz as well outside of Mouchet. So there are a number of downstream opportunities on the back of both of our projects. And ideally, and we have federal and state government support to ultimately contribute to making solar panels here in Australia. So thank you very much. If you've got any questions, come and see us at the booth.